The invitation. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a utility bill and a glossy catalog advertising artisanal kitchenware Claire had no intention of buying. It was heavier than average, its thick cream cardstock cool beneath her fingertips, the edges crisp and unyielding. Her name, Miss Claire Mitchell, was etched in elegant, looping calligraphy, an unfamiliar hand, yet the return address was immediately, sickeningly familiar. The quiet, tree-lined street in Brooklyn where Marcus Thorne still lived, or had lived. Claire was perched on the edge of her reclaimed wood kitchen island, a half-eaten bowl of oatmeal growing cold beside her laptop. The early morning light, usually a source of quiet satisfaction as it streamed into her meticulously curated Manhattan apartment, now felt intrusive, spotlighting the tremor in her hand as she turned the envelope over. Her breath hitched, a tiny, involuntary sound swallowed by the hum of the city awakening outside her window. For 3 years, Marcus had been a ghost, a carefully compartmentalized memory. His name, when it surfaced, was an echo in conversations with mutual acquaintances, quickly dismissed, or a fleeting, unbidden image triggered by a song on the radio, a particular scent on the street. She had built a fortress around that part of her past, mortared with ambition and sealed with the conviction of having made the right choice. Now, this single, innocuous piece of paper felt like a siege engine, battering down her defenses. Her finger traced the raised texture of the calligraphy. This wasn't a holiday card. It wasn't a change of address notice. Her stomach churned with a premonition that settled like a lead weight in her gut. With a swift, almost violent movement, she tore open the seal. The delicate paper, ripping with a sound disproportionately loud in the quiet apartment. Inside, nested within another layer of tissue paper, lay the invitation. Her eyes scanned the familiar name, Marcus Thorne, and then landed on the unfamiliar one beside it, Eleanor Vance. Her gaze darted to the date, emblazoned in gold script, October 17th, a mere 6 weeks away. The venue, a picturesque estate upstate, was described with a poetic flourish, followed by details for the reception, the attire, the RSVP card. It was a wedding invitation. Marcus's wedding invitation. The words blurred. The carefully constructed calm of her morning shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. She didn't drop the card, but her grip tightened until her knuckles ached, the elegant script digging into her palm. A wave of nausea washed over her, unexpected and potent. It wasn't just surprise she felt, or even shock. It was a chaotic symphony of emotions, a sharp, searing pang of what felt suspiciously like betrayal, followed by a dizzying rush of disbelief, a low thrum of something akin to jealousy, and then, most unsettling of all, a profound, disorienting sadness. 3 years. 3 years since she had, with a clinical precision that had surprised even herself, severed the cord that bound them. 3 years since she had chosen a different path, a future she had meticulously architected for herself, a future that emphatically did not include Marcus. She had walked away, confidently, decisively, believing she was stepping into her destiny. And now this stark, undeniable proof that life had moved on, that he had moved on, not just into another relationship, but into the ultimate commitment. He was getting married. A hollow laugh escaped her, brittle and humorless. She, Claire Mitchell, the paragon of self-possession, the architect of her own success, was sitting in her perfect apartment, staring at an invitation that felt like an indictment. She was 29 years old, on the cusp of a major promotion, surrounded by the fruits of her ambition, and suddenly, profoundly, she didn't know if she had made the right choice. The question, dormant for so long, awoke with a roar, echoing in the sudden silence of her heart. Did I make a mistake? Chapter 1. Claire's World. Claire Mitchell's world was a masterpiece of control and precision. At 29, she was a senior marketing executive at Sterling and Finch, a powerhouse advertising agency renowned for its innovative campaigns and cutthroat environment. Her days were a blur of high-stakes meetings, strategic presentations, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. She thrived in this milieu, her sharp intellect and unwavering focus propelling her upwards with an almost alarming speed. Her office, a sleek, glass-walled area overlooking Midtown Manhattan, was a testament to her ascent. Minimalist design, a panoramic view, and a perpetual hum of productivity. This morning, however, the usual hum was a discordant buzz. The wedding invitation, now tucked away in her designer handbag, was a lead ball in her stomach, making every interaction feel like a performance, every smile a strain. She walked into the Sterling and Finch lobby, its polished marble floors reflecting the early morning light, its air thick with the scent of expensive coffee and ambition. The crisp, tailored fabric of her power suit felt less like armor and more like a costume. "Good morning, Claire," chirped Brenda, the perennially cheerful receptionist, her voice cutting through Claire's internal monologue. "Morning, Brenda," Claire managed, her smile tight. She navigated the bustling open-plan office, nodding greetings, exchanging brief pleasantries. Her team was already at their desks, a hive of activity. They looked to her for direction, for inspiration, for the unwavering leadership she always provided. Today, she felt like a fraud. Her first meeting was with the CEO, Richard Sterling, a man whose reputation for ruthless effectiveness preceded him. He was reviewing her proposal for the new Viridian Tech account, a multi-million-dollar opportunity that could solidify her path to partner. Claire had prepared meticulously, every slide polished, every statistic memorized, every potential objection anticipated. She could have recited it in her sleep. Yet, as she sat across from Sterling, presenting her vision with the practiced confidence of a seasoned orator, a part of her mind kept drifting. "Marcus is getting married." The words were a silent refrain, an insistent drumbeat beneath her eloquent explanations of market segmentation and brand penetration. She saw Sterling's impassive gaze, felt the weight of his scrutiny, and managed to stay present, her professional mask firmly in place. "Excellent, Claire," Sterling finally said, leaning back in his ergonomic chair, a rare flicker of approval in his eyes. "This is precisely the kind of strategic thinking we need. Consider Viridian yours. Begin execution immediately. I expect weekly updates." A thrill of victory, familiar and potent, surged through her. This was what she lived for. This was the reward for the late nights, the sacrifices, the relentless drive. It was a reaffirmation of her choices, her priorities. For a fleeting moment, the shadow of the invitation lifted. But it was only fleeting. As she walked back to her office, the elation began to dissipate, replaced by a dull ache. She closed her office door, the muffled city sounds providing a thin veil of privacy. Her gaze fell upon the framed degrees, the industry awards that adorned her shelves, the meticulously organized desk. This was her empire. She had built it from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick. And yet the silence in the room felt suddenly vast, echoing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophie, her best friend since college. "Drinks tonight? My treat. You sounded off this morning." Sophie Chen was Claire's anchor in the turbulent waters of New York City life. A brilliant litigator, Sophie understood the pressures of a demanding career. But she also possessed a pragmatic wisdom that often cut through Claire's more convoluted thought processes. They had an unspoken rule: no sugarcoating. "Sure," Claire texted back. 7 at the Dalton. She spent the rest of the day in a flurry of activity, burying herself in Viridian Tech's market analysis. The numbers, the projections, the creative brief, they were a welcome distraction, a maze of facts and figures that demanded her full attention, temporarily silencing the clamor in her head. She was good at this, at compartmentalizing, at shutting out the personal to focus on the professional. It had served her well. But as the day waned and the city lights began to prickle the deepening twilight outside her window, the feeling of unease returned. She packed her laptop, her movements automatic, her mind replaying snippets of conversations, moments, smiles. Marcus's smile. The Dalton was a chic, dimly lit bar in the West Village, a favorite haunt for Claire and Sophie. When Claire arrived, Sophie was already at their usual corner booth, a glass of Chardonnay before her, a knowing look in her sharp, intelligent eyes. Sophie, with her sleek bob and impeccably tailored blazer, looked every inch the formidable lawyer she was. "Okay," Sophie said, taking a sip of wine as Claire slid into the booth opposite her. "Spill, you sounded like you'd seen a ghost this morning." Claire hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her own wineglass. "Worse," she murmured, pulling the cream-colored envelope from her bag. She slid it across the polished table. Sophie picked it up, her brow furrowing as she read the calligraphy. Her eyes widened, then narrowed as she extracted the invitation. She read it quickly, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Well, I'll be damned," she said, her voice low. "Marcus Thorne, getting married." She looked up at Claire, her gaze unblinking. "To Eleanor Vance. Do we know an Eleanor Vance?" Claire shook her head, a dry knot forming in her throat. "Never heard of her." Sophie sighed, setting the invitation back down. "Okay, this is something. I mean, it's been 3 years. Are you surprised?" "Surprised? I don't know what I am," Claire admitted, the words spilling out, raw and unfiltered. "Shocked, maybe. Blindsided. I didn't expect it. Not like this." "What did you expect, Claire?" Sophie asked gently, but with her characteristic directness. "That he'd wait around forever? You broke up with him, remember? To find yourself and focus on your career? Your words, not mine." Claire winced. I know, and I stand by those reasons. I needed to. I was suffocating. I wasn't ready for what he wanted. Which was marriage, kids, a white picket fence and some charming Brooklyn brownstone, Sophie supplied, a wry smile playing on her lips. "Exactly," Claire said, swirling the wine in her glass. "And I wasn't there. I wanted the corner office, the power suit, the international travel, the whole damn empire. And I got it, Sophie. I'm living the dream." Her voice trailed off, the conviction in her words suddenly hollow. Sophie watched her, her expression unreadable. "And is it everything you hoped for?" The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Claire looked around the stylish bar, at the murmuring couples, the clinking glasses, the vibrant tapestry of city life. She had everything she had chased: professional success, financial independence, a sophisticated lifestyle. Her apartment was immaculate, her wardrobe enviable, her social calendar full enough, if not brimming with deep connections. She was, by all outward metrics, thriving. Yet an emptiness, vague and persistent, had begun to creep into the gilded edges of her life. Moments of profound loneliness, dismissed as necessary solitude for a driven woman, now felt more acute. The quiet satisfaction of her achievements sometimes dissolved into a sense of isolation. "It's fulfilling, in its own way," Claire finally said, choosing her words carefully. "I've built something. I'm respected. I'm good at what I do." "But," Sophie prompted, ever the interrogator. Claire took a deep breath. "But seeing this, it just makes me wonder, what did I give up? Was the trade-off worth it? 3 years ago, I was so sure, so absolutely certain I was doing the right thing for me, for my future." She met Sophie's gaze. Her eyes clouded with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Now I'm not so sure anymore. I don't know if I'm sad for him, or for me, or for what we could have been. I don't even know if I still love him, or if this is just ego, regret, jealousy. Sophie reached across the table and squeezed her hand. It's confusing, Claire, and it's okay to feel confused. He was a big part of your life, a first love, a real love. It's not something you just switch off like a light. But I thought I had, Claire whispered, the admission a quiet confession. I thought I'd moved on. I thought I was fine. Sophie sighed. You are fine, Claire. You're more than fine. You're a goddamn force of nature. But emotions aren't always logical. This invitation just ripped open a door you thought you'd sealed shut. It's going to take some time to figure out what's behind it. They talked for hours, the wine loosening Claire's tightly wound defenses. She recounted the details of the invitation, the venue, the date. Sophie, ever practical, suggested she RSVP no, politely, and move on. But Claire knew it wasn't that simple. The invitation was more than just a piece of paper. It was a catalyst, forcing her to confront a past she had meticulously buried, and in doing so, to question the very foundations of her present. As she walked home through the bustling city streets, the cool autumn air a balm on her flushed cheeks, Claire felt a profound sense of disquiet. Her perfectly constructed world had developed a crack, and she wasn't sure how to mend it, or if she even wanted to. Prosody Rate 10, Chapter 2, Echoes of Marcus. The days following the arrival of the invitation were a peculiar torment. Claire found herself caught in a relentless cycle of memory. Each thought of Marcus, triggering a cascade of flashbacks, vivid and insistent. They weren't merely recollections. They were immersive experiences, pulling her back into the very texture and emotion of their shared past. She remembered meeting him at a friend's casual rooftop party in Brooklyn 5 years ago. She was 24, fresh out of her master's program, brimming with ambitious theories about consumer behavior. He was 25, a budding architect, working on his portfolio, sketching designs on napkins even then. He had an easy smile, eyes the color of warm honey, and a quiet confidence that was both grounding and magnetic. She, with her sharp wit and analytical mind, was instantly drawn to his thoughtful nature, his artistic sensibility. So, you think you can convince people to buy things they don't need? He had teased, leaning against the railing, the city lights twinkling behind him. His voice was a low rumble, instantly comforting. I think I can show them how something they don't need can enhance their lives, she'd retorted, a playful challenge in her eyes. It's about understanding desire, Marcus. Human desire. He chuckled, a sound that used to send a shiver down her spine. And what about your desires, Claire Mitchell? What do you truly desire? The question, so innocent then, now resonated with a painful irony. Their relationship had blossomed quickly, an intoxicating blend of intellectual sparring and deep emotional connection. He introduced her to independent films, obscure jazz clubs, and the quiet joy of spending an entire Sunday lost in a bookstore. She, in turn, so innocent then, now resonated with a painful irony, opened his eyes to the strategic beauty of a well-executed campaign, the thrill of anticipating market trends. They complemented each other, two seemingly disparate halves forming a surprisingly cohesive whole. He loved her ambition, he often said. He admired her drive, her fierce intelligence. He would watch her, mesmerized, as she worked on a presentation late into the night, her brow furrowed in concentration. He was her biggest cheerleader, her staunchest supporter. You're going to conquer the world, Claire, he'd whispered one night, tracing the line of her jaw as she lay in his arms, the moonlight painting silver streaks across his bedroom floor. And I'll be right here, cheering you on. His apartment, a cozy one-bedroom in Williamsburg, was their sanctuary. It smelled of coffee, old books, and the faint, earthy scent of his charcoal sketches. They'd spent countless hours there, cooking elaborate meals, discussing everything from global politics to the nuances of their favorite authors, making love with a tenderness and passion that had felt utterly unique. He was the one who could soothe her anxieties after a stressful day, the one who could make her laugh until her sides ached, the one who saw beneath her polished exterior to the vulnerable core she rarely revealed. He was the first man who had ever truly seen her, not just the ambitious go-getter, but the girl who sometimes felt overwhelmed, who longed for a quiet strength beside her. He offered stability, a gentle anchoring presence in her often chaotic world. But that stability, which had once felt so comforting, slowly began to chafe. As her career gained momentum, as the demands on her time intensified, she started to feel an insidious pressure. Marcus, while supportive, envisioned a future that seemed to diverge from hers. He spoke of wanting a family, a home, a life built on shared experiences and quiet domesticity. He wasn't demanding it immediately, but the trajectory was clear. Claire, on the other hand, saw only the next rung on the corporate ladder, the next challenge to conquer. Her ambition was a ravenous beast, always demanding more. The idea of settling down, of sacrificing even a fraction of her professional ascent for a different kind of fulfillment, felt like a betrayal of herself, a capitulation. She had fought too hard, worked too diligently to dilute her focus now. The subtle cracks began to appear. She started missing their Sunday brunches for urgent client calls, canceling their weekend getaways for unexpected business trips. His gentle suggestions for compromise started to sound like subtle criticisms. His unwavering presence, a tether she felt she needed to break free from. "Claire," he'd said one evening, his voice tinged with a weariness that pierced her heart, "we barely see each other. When we do, your mind is always somewhere else." He was sitting on the edge of their bed, a half-finished sketchpad on his lap. He looked tired, his usually bright eyes shadowed. "I'm busy, Marcus," she'd snapped, pulling on her silk pajamas, her back to him. "This is a critical time for me at work. You know that." "I do know that," he'd replied softly, "and I'm proud of you. But where do I fit into this, Claire? Where do we fit?" That question had haunted her. The truth was, she didn't know, or rather, she didn't want to know. The answer felt too heavy, too complex. It felt like a choice between two equally compelling, yet fundamentally incompatible futures. She convinced herself there was no room for compromise. She couldn't be the woman Marcus needed, and she couldn't not be the woman she was determined to become. The breakup was agonizing, a slow, painful extraction rather than a clean cut. She remembered the precise moment, a cold, rainy evening in November, 3 years ago. They were sitting on their worn sofa, a silence stretching between them, thick with unspoken grievances. "I can't do this anymore, Marcus," she'd said, her voice thin, trembling despite her resolve. "I can't give you what you deserve. Not now. Maybe not ever. I need to be selfish right now. I need to focus on my career, on building my life." He had looked at her, his honey-colored eyes filled with a heartbreak so profound it had instantly carved its own wound in her soul. He hadn't pleaded, hadn't argued. His quiet acceptance was more devastating than any fight. "I understand," he'd finally said, his voice hoarse. "I wish you didn't have to choose, Claire. I wish we could have built something together. But I can't be half of you, and you can't be half of me." He had packed his things the next day, a few boxes of books, his sketch pads, a favorite old lamp. The apartment had felt hollowed out, stripped of its warmth. She had stood in the doorway, watching him go, a potent cocktail of relief and desolation churning within her. She told herself it was necessary, a painful but ultimately liberating act of self-preservation. She had traded love for ambition, connection for independence, and in the immediate aftermath, surrounded by the quiet emptiness of her apartment, she had believed it was the only way to become the woman she was meant to be. Now, those memories played on an endless loop, each one sharpening the edges of her current confusion. She remembered the easy intimacy, the shared laughter, the way he could make her feel utterly safe and cherished. She remembered the arguments, the subtle resentment, the gnawing feeling that she was constantly being pulled in two directions. She scrolled through old photos on her phone, images she hadn't looked at in years. Marcus's arm around her at a summer concert, his beaming face on a hiking trail, their intertwined hands. He looked so happy, so vibrant, so utterly theirs. Each image was a tiny dagger, twisting in the wound the invitation had opened. Sophie, witnessing Claire's unraveling, tried to intervene. "You're romanticizing it, Claire. You remember the good, but you forget the reasons you ended it. It wasn't perfect. You weren't happy then, not in the way you wanted to be." "But was this happiness any better?" Claire countered, gesturing vaguely at her sleek, orderly apartment, at the trophies of her success. "Was this emptiness I'm feeling now worth that loss?" The question lingered, unanswered. The echoes of Marcus were growing louder, transforming from faint whispers into a resounding chorus, filling every quiet moment, every solitary space in her meticulously constructed life. He wasn't just a memory anymore. He was a living, breathing possibility she had discarded, a path not taken, now irrevocably closed off by an impending marriage to someone else. And the thought, once abstract, now hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had walked away, and he had found happiness, a happiness that no longer included her. And she, in her glittering, ambitious world, was suddenly, profoundly, alone with her complicated regrets. Chapter 3. The Spiral. The invitation sat on her bedside table, a constant, tangible reminder. Claire had tried to put it away, to bury it in a drawer, but an inexplicable compulsion kept it close. A silent, menacing sentinel. It was a physical manifestation of her internal chaos. Sleep became elusive, her nights a restless churn of racing thoughts and fragmented dreams, featuring Marcus, his new fiancé, and a distorted version of herself, always just out of reach. Her focus at work, usually unwavering, began to fray at the edges. During a critical meeting with the Viridian tech team, her mind wandered, a complex data point blurring into a vision of Marcus laughing, his head thrown back, sunlight in his hair. She caught herself, forced a smile, and rattled off the next set of talking points. But a cold dread settled in. She was losing her grip. She started to search for Eleanor Vance. Initially, it was a casual curiosity, a harmless urge to put a face to the name. But soon, it morphed into an obsessive, late-night ritual. She found Eleanor's LinkedIn profile, a graphic designer with a portfolio of elegant, minimalist work. Then Instagram, a curated feed of vibrant travel photos, art installations, and surprisingly, several images of Eleanor and Marcus together. Eleanor was beautiful, in a soft, understated way that was entirely different from Claire's own sharp, sophisticated aesthetic. She had a warm, genuine smile, framed by kind eyes. In one photo, Marcus was looking at Eleanor with an expression Claire recognized, an expression she had once believed was reserved only for her. A profound tenderness, an unmistakable adoration. They looked happy, unburdened, genuinely, deeply content. The sight was a fresh wound, each image a painful stab. Claire felt a bewildering mix of emotions, There was the expected pang of jealousy, a visceral reaction to seeing her past love so unequivocally moved on. But beneath that, there was a deeper, more insidious feeling, a sense of loss, not just of Marcus, but of the version of herself she had been with him. She looked at Eleanor, and for a terrifying moment, she saw the life she might have had. "Are you still stalking Marcus's fiancée online?" Sophie asked, her voice laced with concern, as they sat in Claire's apartment one Friday evening, surrounded by takeout containers. Claire had called in sick to work, claiming a migraine, but in truth, she just couldn't face another day of pretending. Claire startled, quickly minimizing the browser window on her laptop. "No," she lied, but her flushed cheeks betrayed her. "Just casual observation." Sophie raised an eyebrow. Casual observation rarely involves looking at someone's cousin's dog grooming business's Instagram page. Claire sighed, defeated. "I can't help it, Soph. It's like a train wreck I can't look away from." "It's self-sabotage," Sophie corrected, her tone firm. "You're torturing yourself. Why? What do you hope to achieve by comparing yourself to this woman? You're not her, and Marcus clearly isn't the Marcus you remember anymore. He's with her." "I know that," Claire retorted, her voice rising in frustration. "But it's like, I thought I was fine. I thought I made the right choices. I built this incredible life, didn't I? And yet, when I see them, so settled, so happy, I feel, I don't know, empty, like I missed out on something vital." "You chose a different path, Claire," Sophie reminded her patiently. "A path you wanted. You fought for this career, this apartment, this independence. Don't discredit all that just because your ex found love again." "But what if I chose wrong?" Claire whispered, the question escaping her lips almost involuntarily. "What if I sacrificed the one thing that truly mattered for something that just feels shiny?" Sophie paused, her gaze softening. "Love isn't a trophy, Claire. And ambition isn't inherently empty. You can have both. But back then, you felt you couldn't. And maybe you were right. You and Marcus were heading in different directions. He wanted a partner who was ready to build a home. You wanted to build an empire. There's no right or wrong. Just different priorities." "But I miss him," Claire admitted, the words catching in her throat, a raw confession she hadn't fully articulated even to herself. "I miss the way he looked at me. I miss the way he made me feel. I miss us." "Or you miss the idea of him," Sophie countered gently. "You miss the comfort, the stability, the emotional connection you had, which is perfectly natural. But that doesn't mean you should be with him now. He's moved on. You need to too." Claire knew Sophie was right, logically. But her emotions were a tangled mess, refusing to adhere to logic. She tried to go on dates with David, a charming, easygoing colleague who'd been subtly pursuing her for months. David was handsome, intelligent, and made her laugh. He was everything a rational woman would want in a casual relationship. But every time he touched her, every time he leaned in for a kiss, she found herself pulling back, a phantom touch of Marcus's hand on her arm, a ghost of his scent in her memory interfering. She ended up pushing David away, sensing his frustration and feeling a fresh wave of guilt. Her once meticulously ordered apartment began to reflect her internal state. Papers piled up on her desk, unopened mail sat forgotten, and the pristine surfaces gathered a thin film of dust. She neglected her workout routine. Her healthy meals replaced by comfort food and endless cups of coffee. She scrolled aimlessly through social media, consumed by comparison and regret. One evening, staring at the invitation, a desperate thought crystallized in her mind. She had to see him. She had to know. Not to win him back, not even to confess her confusion, but simply to gauge him, to understand the man he had become, the life he had built. She needed to see if the ghost haunting her was real. or merely a projection of her own unresolved fears? She needed closure, an answer to the gnawing question that refused to leave her. Was she truly happy, or had she made the biggest mistake of her life? The idea was terrifying, irrational, and completely compelling. She knew Sophie would disapprove. Her rational mind screamed against it, but her heart, a bewildered, bruised thing, demanded an answer. The spiral was tightening, and she felt an urgent need to either break free or hit rock bottom. And seeing Marcus, confronting the reality of his new life, felt like the only way to find out which it would be. Chapter 4: Confrontation and Revelation. Claire picked a neutral venue for their encounter, a pop-up art gallery opening in Chelsea. Precisely the kind of event she knew Marcus, with his artistic leanings, would frequent. She had agonized over her outfit, finally settling on a sleek black jumpsuit that was sophisticated without being overtly provocative. A silent assertion of her success, yet vulnerable enough to invite conversation. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she navigated the crowded gallery, the chatter of voices and clinking of glasses, a dull roar in her ears. Then she saw him. He was standing by a minimalist sculpture, talking animatedly with a group of people. He looked older, his jawline a little more defined, a subtle maturity etched around his eyes. He wore a fitted dark blazer over a simple white shirt, a look that was effortlessly stylish, classic Marcus. His hair, still thick and dark, had a few silver strands at the temples that she hadn't remembered. He looked good, more than good. He looked happy. And then she saw her, Eleanor Vance. She was by his side, her arm casually linked through his. She was even more lovely in person, her smile radiating a gentle warmth that made Claire's perfectly poised facade feel brittle and cold. Eleanor was wearing a simple, elegant dress that complemented her figure without being ostentatious. She leaned her head against Marcus's shoulder for a moment, and he looked down at her, a profound affection in his gaze that sent a fresh jolt of pain through Claire. Claire felt a wave of dizziness, the air suddenly thin. Her carefully constructed resolve threatened to crumble. She almost turned and fled, a humiliating retreat. But then Marcus looked up, his eyes sweeping across the room, and they locked onto hers. His smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of surprise. Then a more guarded, polite expression. He excused himself from the group, drawing Eleanor gently with him. They walked towards her, and Claire felt every nerve-ending prickle, acutely aware of the space between them, the chasm that 3 years had carved. "Claire," Marcus said, his voice deeper than she remembered, but still carrying that familiar, comforting cadence. What a surprise! There was no genuine warmth, but no hostility either, just a carefully maintained neutrality. "Marcus," Claire replied, her voice steady, a testament to years of executive training. "You too. This is a beautiful collection." She gestured vaguely at the art around them. He nodded. "Yes, it is. Claire, this is Eleanor Vance. Eleanor, this is Claire Mitchell, an old friend." The words, "old friend," felt like a physical blow. It neatly categorized her, placed her firmly in the past, devoid of any lingering significance. Claire extended her hand to Eleanor, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "It's so lovely to finally meet you, Claire," Eleanor said, her grip firm and genuine, her voice soft and melodious. "Marcus has spoken about you." Claire's heart pounded. Spoken about her? What had he said? Had he painted her as the ambitious villain who broke his heart? Or merely a footnote, a chapter closed? She met Eleanor's gaze, searching for judgment, for any hint of suspicion, but found only genuine politeness and a surprising lack of pretense. Eleanor was not the villain, nor was she the innocent victim. She was simply Eleanor, a woman who loved Marcus and was loved in return. They made polite small talk for a few minutes, discussing the art, the weather, the general buzz of the city. Claire found herself admiring Eleanor's quiet grace, her easy laughter. She saw how Marcus's eyes softened when he looked at Eleanor, how he instinctively reached for her hand. There was an undeniable connection, a comfortable intimacy that felt both enviable and heartbreaking. "We're actually heading out for dinner," Marcus said finally, a polite closing to their brief interaction. "But it was good to see you, Claire." "You too," Claire said, the words feeling utterly inadequate. "Congratulations, by the way, on the wedding." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Marcus smiled, a genuine smile this time, full of quiet joy. "Thank you, Claire. We're very excited." He squeezed Eleanor's hand, and then they were gone. Blending into the crowd, their figures receding, leaving Claire standing alone amidst the art, the laughter, and the overwhelming silence of her own realization. The confrontation hadn't been a dramatic showdown. There were no tears, no heated words, no confessions. It had been polite, understated, and utterly devastating. She had come seeking an answer, and she had found it in the undeniable happiness radiating from Marcus and Eleanor. She hadn't expected to see him so utterly moved on, so completely invested in a new life. She had, in some deep, unspoken corner of her heart, clung to the fantasy that he still carried a torch for her, that he might, perhaps, regret their parting just a little, that the door was not entirely, irrevocably shut, but it was. He was happy. He was content. He was building a future with someone else, someone who evidently fulfilled the needs Claire could not or would not meet. And seeing that, witnessing their genuine connection, a truth crystallized in her mind, sharp and undeniable. Her feelings for Marcus were not the romantic love she had once shared with him. It was a phantom limb ache, a longing for a past that could never be recreated, a yearning for an idealized version of herself that existed only in the soft focus of memory. She wasn't jealous of Eleanor, not really. She was envious of the peace Eleanor brought to Marcus, and perhaps, more accurately, she was envious of the peace he had found, a peace that eluded Claire in her own glittering, isolated world. The confrontation had been a revelation, but not in the way she had anticipated. It wasn't about him being the one she let go. It was about her, about the choices she had made, the woman she had become, and the uncomfortable truth that, despite all her achievements, she still felt a profound sense of incompleteness. The answer she sought wasn't in Marcus's eyes, but in the reflection staring back at her from the polished gallery wall. A woman who had to now contend with the full weight of her past and the daunting prospect of forging a new, more authentic future. The spiral hadn't bottomed out, but the direction had changed. The focus had shifted, irrevocably, back to herself. Chapter 5: Resolution and Self-Discovery. The aftermath of the gallery encounter left Claire feeling strangely hollowed out, but also, paradoxically, with a nascent sense of clarity. The incessant noise in her head, the chaotic clamor of what if and if only, had finally begun to quiet. Seeing Marcus, truly seeing him happy and at peace with Eleanor, had functioned as a brutal yet necessary exorcism. The ghost she had been chasing, the phantom of a lost love, had finally been laid to rest. She called Sophie that night, her voice raspy. "I saw him," she stated, omitting the dramatic details. "And?" Sophie asked, her tone cautious, expecting the worst. "And he's happy," Claire said, a profound sigh escaping her. "Truly happy. She's lovely, Sophie. Really lovely." A beat of silence. "And how do you feel?" Claire hesitated, searching for the right words. Relieved in a way, and sad, but mostly, "I feel like I've finally woken up." She paused again. It wasn't him I was missing, Soph. Not really. It was what he represented, the comfort, the ease, the certainty I thought I had once. It was about the future I thought I'd lost or traded away. Sophie hummed. Took you long enough, but I'm glad you're finally seeing it. He was the anchor I cut loose to chase my storm. Claire continued, the metaphor forming organically in her mind. And now I'm standing in the eye of my own storm, wondering why it's so quiet. The conversation with Sophie continued for a long time, stretching into the early hours. Claire found herself articulating thoughts and feelings she hadn't dared to acknowledge, even to herself. She spoke of the relentless pursuit of success, the quiet isolation that came with it, the fleeting satisfaction of achievements that quickly faded, leaving her yearning for something more substantial. Something deeper. The next morning, Claire woke with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in weeks. The invitation was still on her bedside table, but it no longer held the same power. It was just a card now, a memento of a pivotal moment. She picked it up, then walked over to her desk, found the RSVP card, and meticulously filled it out. Declines with thanks and best wishes. The simple act felt profoundly liberating. She spent the following days in deep introspection, revisiting not just her relationship with Marcus, but her entire life trajectory. Her ambition, once a guiding star, felt more like a relentless taskmaster. She loved her work, the intellectual challenge, the creative problem-solving. But she realized she had allowed it to consume her, to define her entirely, at the expense of other vital aspects of her being. She had prioritized the climb, but forgotten to enjoy the view. Or even to figure out what kind of view she truly wanted. She started making small changes. She reactivated her gym membership, rediscovered the joy of cooking healthy meals, and consciously carved out time for friends who weren't connected to her professional life. She reconnected with David, apologizing for her erratic behavior and explaining, vaguely, that she had been going through a period of personal reflection. He was understanding, but she knew, with a gentle certainty, that he wasn't her future. Her journey of self-discovery needed to be a solo one for now. One crisp autumn afternoon, Claire took a long walk through Central Park, the golden leaves crunching beneath her boots. She thought about her conversation with Marcus at the gallery, his gentle smile, his contentment. It wasn't a rebuke, it was a mirror. He had found his path, a path that led to love and stability, and she, in her own way, needed to find hers. Her career was still important, she realized. It was a part of who she was, a powerful expression of her capabilities. But it couldn't be the only part. She needed to cultivate a life that was rich and multifaceted, one that encompassed not just professional triumphs, but also genuine connection, emotional depth, and a sense of belonging. She longed for a quiet companion, someone to share the small moments, the silent joys, someone to build a future with, not as a distraction from her ambition, but as an integral part of a whole, fulfilling life. She thought about what Marcus had wanted: a home, a family. 3 years ago, those desires had felt like shackles. Now she looked at them differently. They weren't an antithesis to her career. They were another form of creation, another kind of legacy. She didn't know if she wanted exactly what Marcus had, but she now understood the value of what she had once dismissed. The resolution wasn't an epiphany that magically presented her with a perfect future. There is no sudden new love interest waiting around the corner, no dramatic career shift. Instead, it was a quiet, profound acceptance. Acceptance of her past choices without judgment or regret. She had made the best decisions she could at the time, driven by genuine, albeit sometimes misguided, aspirations. And acceptance of her present, acknowledging the voids that needed filling, the imbalances that needed correcting, Claire realized that the invitation, initially a harbinger of confusion and regret, had ultimately become a gift. It had forced her to stop, to look inward, to truly assess her life. It had compelled her to define success not just by her achievements, but by her own inner peace and happiness. The wedding day arrived, a beautiful autumn Saturday. Claire spent it with Sophie, exploring a new neighborhood, discovering a charming little bookstore, laughing over artisanal coffees. She didn't think of Marcus with pain, but with a quiet fondness, wishing him well. She imagined him standing at the altar, looking at Eleanor with that same tender adoration, and she felt a genuine, unforced warmth for his happiness. As the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the city, Claire felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. She wasn't Claire Mitchell, the executive who had broken Marcus Thorne's heart. She was simply Claire Mitchell, a woman on the precipice of 30. Successful in her career, yes, but more importantly, now keenly aware of her own desires, her own capacity for love, and her own path forward. She didn't know what the future held. Perhaps a new relationship, one built on a foundation of mutual ambition and shared emotional intimacy. Perhaps a reevaluation of her career goals, a search for more meaning beyond the pursuit of power. But for the first time in a long time, she felt truly ready to embrace it, whatever it might be. She was no longer running from her past or hiding behind her achievements. She was ready to build a life that was truly her own, authentic and whole, a life that finally, truly felt like home. The invitation had closed one chapter, but it had opened a boundless, exhilarating new one. Claire was ready to write it.